It's a nice fall day. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to cover some stuff, and then you're going to find your fellow people that have the same number as you, even though we're in a smaller group. And there's the distinct possibility that there aren't too many of you. Hopefully, we've got each number covered. And then you and your group will come to an agreement about what you think your document means. I'll kind of float around to make sure so that tomorrow, when we actually start reporting on these documents, we've got a pretty good attack. So we're going to start off with the U.S. and its interaction with the world. Let me just give you a clue for the next unit test. The information on this slide will be on the test called the U.S. and the world. Anytime there's a relationship between the U.S. and a foreign country, it's going to be in that test. Okie dokie. Roy, look at this map. This is the United States the day we were born, 1783. Treaty of Paris, 1783. And you'll see that our western border was the Mississippi River, and our southern border was this thing called Florida. And that's the problem we had with Spain right there. What is Florida? There's what we said was Florida, and there's what the Spanish said was Florida. And this, by the way, is a big idea throughout American history. It's what we say is the border of whatever versus what they say is the border of whatever. Wait till we get to the Mexican-American War, which was started over what was the border of Texas. Well, we said it was the Rio Grande, and they said, no, it's the Nueces River, and then we go to war. Same thing here. That's why this area is shaded. It's because the Spanish claimed this is Florida. And we said, no, it isn't. That's not Florida. This is Florida. Okay, so that's problem number one. Problem number two is the Mississippi River. That was our western border. Imagine you have a car and it's parked in the garage. So there's a garage door. But your neighbor's got the garage door opener. And that's the only way to open the garage door. The garage door opener. Now, if you were me, I would just lift the thing. But you, being weak, how about push-ups? Anyway, you have to go every day to your neighbor and say, will you please open my garage door so I can go to school? And every day your neighbor says, sure, no problem. But he controls the entry and exit to your garage. And that's the situation because, yes, we had the Mississippi River, but Spain controlled the city of New Orleans. Spain owned New Orleans, which is, of course, the end of the Mississippi River. And when you own New Orleans, you control who goes in and out of the Mississippi River, which is sort of important because remember, back then, this is the best way to travel. This is the best way to send goods. They don't have trains yet. So if you live out here and you have goods that you want to sell to people who live in New York, the best thing to do is to get to the Mississippi River, go down, and around. That was faster than by land. But again, if Spain controls New Orleans and doesn't give you permission to go through, you can't. They have the garage door opener. And in 1784, in a little spat with the U.S., they said you cannot use New Orleans anymore. So we have two problems. One, disputed territory in Florida. Two, closed off access to the Mississippi. Good.
So it only took a year for them to get angry at us?
Yeah.
And take it away?
Well, yeah. Yes. They wanted more money to have permission to pass through. Okay. And then there's France, who bears a great deal of resentment. One, they want their money back. They lent us money to fight the British. They want it back. Pay us. And we were broke. We're broke. Where are we going to get that money? Now, we had two taxes. We had the tariff. We had the whiskey tax. And to punish us, they closed off trade with us. So think about this. Last time we talked was Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Let's go Tuesday. We knew that the British were sort of angry because they were angry they lost the Revolutionary War. Plus, they refused to remove their soldiers from those forts in this area here. They were still there. Plus, they annexed Vermont. And plus, they never rescinded their navigation acts. So we're messed up in our relationship with Britain. Now we're messed up on our relationship with Spain. Now we're messed up in our relationship with France. Plus, there are the Indians, who aren't really big fans of us. So we're in a rough way here. Add to that another entity called the Barbary States, which don't exist anymore, but at the time they were a thing. Today we call them Libya. Back then they were the Barbary States. The Barbary States were an African empire that taxed any nation using the Mediterranean. If you sent boats through the Mediterranean, they had a navy that stopped and taxed you. Okay? Another term would be piracy. The most dangerous area on Earth today, by the way, if you want to know, is this area here. There are pirates that stop ships. And another dangerous area is right here, off the coast of Somalia. Did you ever see Captain Phillips? Is that something like a movie you've heard before? It's probably, I don't know, 5-6 years old now. Tom Hanks. It's very good. It's the true story of pirates off the coast of Somalia that kidnap an American boat and want a tax. They call it a tax, but we called it a ransom. You can't just, I can't just pull people over on the road over there and say, nah, you got to pay the Potter tax here. And they're like, oh, okay. And then I let them go. You know why the Silk Road was so incredibly dangerous in the Middle Ages was that that's exactly what happened. People would tax others who were using the Silk Road on their way to China and back to China. And if you didn't pay the tax, they would just steal your stuff. They called it a tax. Well, that's not a tax. You're ransoming. You can't do that. That's what these guys were doing. But every country paid it, including the U.S. We just pay the tax because it's cheaper to pay the tax than to fight them. But the British paid it, the Spanish paid it, the French paid it, and now that we're on our own, supposedly we're going to pay it. But we're broke. We're broke. We can't afford it. So we got problems everywhere here. Right? No one likes us. They all liked us when we were anti-British, but now that we're on our own, now we're our own thing. Any questions here? All right, so we got some problems to solve. Ready? Yes? Meanwhile, now this is what's going on within the country itself. So this would be on one of the other two tests. There are always going to be 3 objective tests. If it's the US plus a foreign entity, it's America in the world. If it's examining the role of the US federal government, it's the US liberator or oppressor. No, it's the other one. What's that other one called? Oppressor, America in the world.
Something government.
Yeah, government. Yeah.
Role of government.
Role of, very good. Role of government. And then if it has to do with the rights of minorities, rights of women, expanding or contracting rights, it's the liberator or oppressor. Okay. So what's happening within the country? While we have all these problems with foreign countries, we also have problems within our nation itself. And that's because of what's going on between the states. Does anyone know what we're looking at here? What is that? That's Maryland, the state of Maryland. It's a messed up shape, isn't it? It's so strangely shaped. And do you see the red lines? That's what Maryland's neighbors claimed was the actual border between Maryland and its neighbors. So, for example, Virginia said, well, this chunk of land, that's ours. This is ours. This belongs to Virginia. and other states, well, that's ours. That's ours. And Maryland's like, So potentially a civil war is going to erupt when we're born because of the arguing between states about what the border is. Did you know that originally the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin was far further west? And they moved it to the St. Croix. So supposedly it could have been where the Mississippi River is. But for whatever reason, they moved it to the St. Croix. Okay. So look, we have the specter of this thing called anarchy. Now, when I throw out the word anarchy, I think that's a misunderstood term. We're going to go with the definition of what anarchy means. Anarchy is not total absence of government. That's chaos. Anarchy means the rejection of this idea of nation. Right? You and I look at that map, like that world map there, and say, that is the way it is. That is the way Earth is organized. And I will counter by saying, that's a way Earth is organized. Earth is organized into nations, and then within nations, states and counties and stuff like that. And that's because you and I are Americans, and we believe that nations are organic, but they aren't. Nations are an invention. People invented nation. And if they invented nation, that means there was a time when there weren't nations, right? That they invented this concept of nation. But Earth at one point had a non-nation way of organizing. Anarchists believe nations are a poor way of organizing. And that's why slightly before World War I, there was an attempt on Archduke Franz Ferdinand because people didn't like his nation or empire. That's why there was an attempt on McKinley's life, because people were rejecting the U.S. empire. Here we go. On the day we were born, there was already arguing between states. And so we can call this anarchy. They were taxing each other's goods. They were arguing over what's the actual border. You had to trade in your state money when you entered a new state for that state's money. Can you imagine if Minnesota had different currency than Wisconsin? So every time you went to Mall of America, you'd have to trade in your Wisconsin currency for Minnesota currency. And that would be confusing. It would create a sense of separation between Minnesota and Wisconsin. Okay, well that's what's existing. And of course, the anger of taxes. The anger of taxes. So let's meet Daniel Shea. Daniel Shea. He's a real fella, and he's a farmer. He lives in Massachusetts. And what was going on was that the state of Massachusetts was taking away farmers' land because the farmers weren't paying their mortgage. They could not afford to live on their farm. So the state of Massachusetts was taking away their farms. The problem was that these guys were veterans. They fought in the Revolutionary War. They're heroes. And the federal government is taking away their land. Don't you love America? And so Daniel Shea organizes an army. These are veterans that he organizes to resist. Now remember, we are at this time, this is 1787, we are exactly 4 years old. We're 4 years old. We just overthrew the British. Then we impose a tax on whiskey. And we tax imports. And all these states are arguing with each other. And they're taxing each other's goods. And veterans who fought and died are having their property taken away by this federal state government, Massachusetts. And then Daniel Shea says, we're not going to take it anymore. And he organizes this army. I mean, it looks like a rebellion. Well, it was a rebellion, Shea's rebellion. They organized and marched, and they made some demands. Stop taxing us so much, Massachusetts. And stop taking away property of people who fought and died so that we could be an independent nation. Stop it. In the big picture, though, this looks like an attempt to overthrow the state of Massachusetts. This looks like a revolution, which they just got done fighting 4 years ago. It looks like an attempt to change the organization, the order. And we need order. We need order. Okay. Two big questions. Did the U.S. government respond to Shays' rebellion? Was there a national response? And of course, the answer is no. There was no national response because of the Articles of Confederation, which did not authorize the creation of any army. The national government, the federal government, could not raise an army. Only states could. So when Daniel Shays is organizing this rebellion, all the federal government could do is say, uh-oh, hey, rest of states, maybe we should squash this rebellion like a grape. They could not compel. They could not force the other states. Now, do you think these other states said, great, awesome, let's do it? These are the same states that have their own currency and are arguing with each other and are taxing each other's goods. They're not going to jump to the opportunity of having their citizens die because some farmer in Massachusetts is leading an organized rebellion. What do they care? Take care of yourself, Massachusetts. Can you imagine that today? Can you imagine if the mighty Canadian Army invaded Wisconsin and Wisconsin is pleading to the rest of the nation, my God, we're being invaded. And the rest of the nation said, good luck. It is Canada, right? You can handle it. You know, Wisconsin has about the same, no. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois have about the same population as Canada.
That's sad.
They have good hockey, though. Okay. So the failure to adequately squash this rebellion on a national level, I mean, it didn't work. I mean, I think Daniel, he got sick and he died. So that was the end of that. But it did expose the failure of the federal government to adequately respond in a strong way. We can't even raise an army. There's nothing in the Articles of Confederation that says we can raise an army. There's no commander-in-chief. We need a new constitution so we can deal with future rebellions in a stronger way. The Daniel Shays Rebellion exposes the weakness of the Articles of Confederation. We need a new government. We need a new constitution. So in a way, Daniel did kind of a favor. So they're gonna have a meeting. We're gonna have a big meeting, and they convene to write a new constitution. And out of that meeting, two different plans emerge. Two different plans. One's called the Virginia Plan, and one's called the New Jersey Plan. Who went? White, male property owners. The elite. At this convention, they're going to make a stronger federal government, right? They're going to make a strong government that can squash rebellions like a grape. And then someone comes along and says, you know, if we do this, aren't we going to kind of recreate the British government here? A government that can put soldiers in your homes if we're not careful, because they wanted to make sure there was no rebellion, and search your boats if we're not careful, because they wanted to make sure there was no rebellion, and assume guilt if you're accused of anything. We got to make sure that, yes, we make a strong federal government, but we want to make sure that Americans still have rights. So can we make a Bill of Rights? At the same time that we make a new government, can we also make a Bill of Rights? And the best they could come up with was, we promise that after we write the new Constitution, we'll make a Bill of Rights. Let's do this first, then we'll make a Bill of Rights. So not at the same time. That means they're going to come up with a constitution, and then what they're going to do is amend the constitution, but they're going to write it first. And do we know how this ends up? Right? Right after the Constitution, they create 10 amendments immediately called the Bill of Rights. Exactly. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. It's kind of weird. I mean, why didn't they just write those into the Constitution themselves? Why write it and then immediately change it? And that's because they wanted to get the plan down first, then change it. Let's just get something on paper first, then we'll change it. Okay. The Virginia plan was favored by populous states. I don't mean large as in terms of geography. I mean large as in a lot of people live there. Favored by large states. Guess what the Virginians' plan as far as a new legislature would be? Right? It's favored by states where a lot of people live. What do you suppose they thought the legislature should look like? Based on what?
You got more votes based on
Population, right? Let's have a House of Representatives based on population. And small states said, that's not fair. You'll outvote us in everything. Okay. We'll have 2 houses of Congress. Both of them will be based on population. Both of them. So representation based on population. And we'll have a strong national government. New Jersey plan was favored by small states. Guess what their idea was?
Or we got the same amount of votes.
Yeah, equal representation, no matter how many people live in your state. We only need 1 House of Congress. Why do we need 2? 1. Each state would have equal representation. Each state would have 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, but we'll all have the same. In many ways, the critics said, you're replacing the Articles of Confederation with the new Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation had 1 House of Congress. The Articles of Confederation had equal representation for each state. How are you changing anything? You're not changing anything. In the middle would be what both plans sort of had in common. I realize there's a lot on this page, sorry. I skipped number 1, who cares? That's obvious. What could Congress do? Well, do you remember one of the problems on the previous slide was that states were arguing with each other? States were taxing each other. States had the ability to have their own currency. Well, this new Congress would be the one that determined trade between states. This new Congress would be the one that dictated taxes. No longer would states tax each other's stuff. Now, you are young Americans. What plan did they go with? Careful, trick question.
Both.
Yeah, in a way, both. So in a way, neither. Right? They took some ideas from this one, and they took some ideas from this one. Right? They like the idea of a 2-house legislature, but one would be based on population, and the other would be based on equal representation. It would create a stronger national government. That Congress would be the thing that dictated trade between states. And so they're writing up this new constitution. And you all are taking civics now? Or did you take it? You took it last year. Oh yeah, you're those people. Right. So you took it last year. So you know ultimately the framework upon which our government was written, 3 branches. This is really kind of focusing on the legislative branch. And what you need to understand is that they intentionally made our government not efficient. They made it so that it isn't easy to pass a bill because we don't want it easy to pass a bill. Because if we pass a bill too easily, we become the British that passes the taxes and the Sedition Act, and well, not the Sedition Act, but the writs of assistance where they can search any vote, and they pass a quarter rank, and they pass this bill and that bill and this bill. It's too easy. We want it difficult to pass a bill so that if the bill does pass, it's a good bill. It's been vetted, and it gets the support of large states and small states. Okay. Questions there? By the way, what is this? What are these things called? Where we have circles where this is true of this and this is true of that, and then what's true in both is in between. What are these things called? Venn diagram. This Venn diagram? Well, I would say that you should know what the Virginia plan said versus what the said. Okay. Now, on this slide would represent ideas that they had to give a little bit. Large states, small states, what they have to give. Now, don't write all this crap down. It's just way too much. So the first thing they compromised was in the executive branch. Some said we need a president that has limited to one term, and it's a 6-year term. And the other side said we shouldn't limit him at all. If he's doing a good job, obviously he, not she, never she, he should be able to continue to be president. Well, they came up with a compromise. 4-year terms, so that, but no limit. That came later. No limit. And he would be the chief executive. He would lead this thing called the executive branch. So these laws that were passed by the House and the Senate would be enforced by the president. Right? You know that is still true. So that's the executive compromise. We need a president. Should we limit him? Kind of. We need to limit him by giving him 4 years and then he has to run again. Right? That's a way of limiting. Okay? So it's sort of a compromise. And then here's the other compromise. Don't worry about this just yet. This is sort of interesting. We're going to have a legislative compromise. We're going to have both. We're going to have a Senate and a House. This favors small states. This favors big states. And then something called 3/5 representation. Does anyone know what that is referring to? Very good. Slaves. So this is the irony that slaves were not counted as people as far as the population is concerned. But southern states, where there were more slaves, said, no. We want them to count. Even though they can't vote, we want them to still count so that we have more people in the House of Representatives, right? The larger population means you have more people in the House of Representatives, right? So we want them to count. And northern states said, no, you can't count slaves, kind of. They can't vote. They shouldn't be counted. And so, this is weird. Southern states said, no, they're people, except when they're not. Right? We want them to count. Just not have the right to vote. But we want them to count. And so if you think this through, what that does is it gives a disproportionate amount of political power to Southern whites. That they have the ability to vote for representation, and we're going to count the slave population to dictate how many representatives there are, even though the only people that get to vote are smaller than the number of people we're going to count in your state. And northern states are like, screw that, that's not fair at all. Well, then we're not going to, well, what do we do? Okay, well, we'll count slaves as 3/5 of a person. So you're 3/5 of a person, and how they came up with that number, I have no idea. But what they did, they counted the number of people, including slaves, and they said, all right, if there are 50 people, we'll count them as 30. So you will have more representation in the House of Representatives, but not as many as the number of slaves there. All right, we can live with that, said the northern states. But when you think that through, this compromise is going to have a huge impact because southern states will have the ability to elect presidents disproportionate. We're going to have people who lose the popular election but win the presidency because southern states have a disproportionate impact on selecting the president because they have more electoral votes than they should, based on this compromise. Did I just talk about any of you have a headache because you're trying to think of what? Where do you get it? This gives southern states a disproportionate amount of power. And it's represented by this chart here. The proportional means how many they should have had by not counting slaves at all in blue. So this is the North, this is the South. And because of this compromise, this is what ends up happening as far as impact. That the voting population is in blue, but now that we're going to count slaves as 3/5, this is what happens, which gives southern states a disproportionate impact on elections. And it's going to matter because later on there's going to be an election where had it been the blue way, candidate A would have won. But because of the 3/5 compromise, candidate B won. And American history as a result. Okay. The third compromise is the compromise on slavery. So 1787, and what Congress said was, we won't touch slavery for 20 years. We can't touch slavery for 20 years. Well, if you do the math, that takes us to 1807. Congress would not be able to affect slavery until 1807. Well, guess what happened on the first day of 1807? Right? Northern states said, all right, let's bring up this slavery thing now that we can. And that starts the whole thing, which ultimately leads to the Civil War, which ultimately leads to Reconstruction, which leads to Jim Crow laws, which leads to Martin Luther King. Here we are, Black Lives Matter. Okay.
That one rule is the reason for Black Lives Matter.
There it is, right here. In 10 seconds, I just explained American history. Yes?
So, like, why did they do that? Was it just because, like, they had so much...
Right, so you had half the country arguing we need to end slavery, it's a dumb economic system, and a half arguing, well, I don't know. If you do this, we're not going to support this constitution of yours. All right, here, South, here, South, are you with us now? Okay, right now, and plus keep in mind, 20 years, that's a drop. That's not forever, that's 20 years. South, you have 20 years to figure out this slavery thing. Because in 20 years, let's roll. Let's go. It's on. Oh yeah, it's on. Oh. Okay. So let's orient ourselves here. Will you get out your documents that you were assigned? Each of you was assigned a document. Right, and you took a shot, and you may have struggled. That's what I expected, was for you to struggle a bit. Let's find each other. So who had document 1? Where are my document 1s? Are you kidding? Nobody had document 1. Oh, that's a fail. How about document 2? Oh, I wanted 3 of you. 3. Okay, will you 3 gather over me? Okay. How about document 3? I got 2 of you, 3 of you. Okay. Will you 3 gather right over there? How about document 4? I got 2. 2 of you. Will you 2 match right here? How about document 5? 3 of you. 2. Will you gather right there? And then document 6, assumes the rest of you. Okay. Will you gather over there? And bring all your stuff with you. You as a group should be able to answer some questions that I have as far as your document is concerned. You should be able to tell me the position of your writer on the issue being addressed. If you don't know what the issue is, it's the words that are the issue being addressed is in a rectangle above the pair of documents. That's the issue. Okay, so for documents 1 and 2, the issue is economic. In other words, taxes. Your speaker, was he in favor of or against the issue? Okay, and then why? Why was he in favor of or against? And then finally, are there any actual examples of the argument being made that you could use in your essay? So see how you as a group have no fear if you're wrong. Who cares if you're wrong? When we gather tomorrow and we report out, your group's going to report, and I'm going to be sitting here and I'm going to say to you, that is completely wrong. Oh, well, it's all right. Just give it a shot. See how you do. This is a skill. Your professors, all of you are college bound, right? Your professors are going to expect that you have the ability to read stuff like this and understand what it's saying. Thus, you're in this class, right? So that we can develop that skill. Okay. Any questions? I will roam and see how you're doing, but that's really the rest. That's it. If your group finishes early, super duper. You've got some Kias due tomorrow. Kia due tomorrow. Yeah, Kia due tomorrow. You've got this Lexington and Concord thing that doesn't seem to be going away. That's in your little universe.
Is that due?
Well,
tomorrow,
it's
or is it-
due.
Okay, 'cause Lindy's outline is due on Monday.
Yeah, that's-
Due, so.
That's okay. Fine.
Monday.
I'm not even collecting it. The only thing that you're being graded on as far as the Lexington paper is the final product, as far as this class is concerned. Okay. Anyone still have essays that you're writing? Blue book essays? You have something? Okay. Yeah, I can look it up. Yeah, what's up?
I'll put it in next month. I have my essay.
Okay.
Next Monday for sure.
All right, put on a little Mozart, and we have the rest of the
I
hour.
haven't had time to do it.
I get it, you're busy.
Oh, wait, no, tomorrow's fine.
Tomorrow is
Wait, after this?